This is an interview coach, and what it does is it helps people who are preparing for an interview to then get ready with some test runs.
Hi there. Before we start, make sure you see yourself clearly in the screen.
Good.
Ready for a question?
Yes.
Okay, so where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I see myself working for Botanic Technologies, sitting in this office looking out at the yacht harbor and being very successful.
Nice job. Now, let's talk about how you answered this question and how you can improve.
Okay.
So what you see here is a way in which the system is moving through different modes. So we have the mode of chat, which is text. We have the mode of voice, which is audio. And we have the mode of the avatar, the visual component. So we're going to be talking about the user experience here to a large degree. Now, multimodal trusted AI personalities is a bit of a mouthful. What we mean by this is that multimodal has these three main modalities we discussed, and that the trusted component is actually not only because of those very modes, but also because we do things like authenticate the bot. Now, one of the things that's really important for us to do as a company in building bots, I think in the industry in general, is we need to start with the end user. And that user experience is something that really ensures that the end user not only understands the value of the bot, but understands how to interact with it. So we always start with every one of our builds, initiates it by saying, hi, I'm here as an interview coach, or hi, I'm here to help you figure out your taxes, or hi, I'm here to help you manage your health. But that gambit is critical, because I hope that we will all stop writing bots that are like, hi, how can I help you? It's the worst way. If somebody just walks up down the street and is like, hi, how can I help you? You can be like, dude, I'm trying to get to the metro. Like, leave me alone. This is not the way bots should interact either. We need context for our interaction that provides meaning. Now, that personality, as being the user experience of artificial intelligence, is part of what provides that context and therefore that meaning. And the more you can contextualize the conversation, the more intelligent it actually gets. Not only for the system on the back end that's doing all these crazy things like Microsoft Cognitive Services and NLP and face rec and CV, et cetera, but actually how, again, the end user interfaces. So the brands now speak, watch, and most importantly, listen. My aunt, who's a tobacco farmer in Tennessee, said, Mark, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a damn good reason. And I think that bots need to be built in the same way, because really, it certainly is about scaling. It certainly is about relationships. But what the scaling and relationship management means is that the brand can listen to those end users and understand what they want and why. That requires trust. So when you have a personality, you end up with a relationship. And when you have a relationship, you need to have trust. And I'll get into how these trust factors work, but we kind of break down bots into 3 phyla, if you will. Chatbots are things where you text, message back and forth. Chat assistants are things like Alexa, Cortana, Siri, and use audio. That is to say they have a voice recognition component and they have a text-to-speech component. Those are just services that get packed in the back end. And then, well, if we're going to add ears, might as well add eyes. And so that's where the avatars come in on the visual side. Every single one of our customers, I'm glad to say they've returned, always ask us for personality. What is personality and how do you build it? Okay, it is not about being everything for everyone all the time. All of these systems here are robotic robots, and they're great early forays. I mean, Alexa has 6,000 people working on that assistant. That's a bot with a lot of people behind it. But 85%, we're going to get into these stats here in a second, 85% of the users that are using Alexa consistently ask it to play music more than any other single thing. It's a speaker, right? But there's thousands and thousands of things Alexa can do. So there's a UX problem with Alexa. People don't know what it's good for and how to interact with it. Some oddly, this is like the Bermuda Triangle, other 85% stats is that we found in the healthcare builds we've done, whether it was for, I don't know, 100 million, 200 million, 1 billion, 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 1 bil government level authorities or whether it was for small Bay Area startups in healthcare, 85% of the people that are talking to a doctor would actually prefer to talk to a bot. Because that way they get around things like judgmental. If I go in and I say like, you know, I've got crabs or HIV positive or whatever it might be, I might not want to be judged by the doctor. So if I say it to a bot, I feel a little bit more comfortable. That's part of the trust factor. And then also, weirdly enough, because people seem to think that bots are this sort of objectively true mathematical thing, the vast majority of users will do what a bot tells them more than they would do what a doctor even tells them. So there's some very strange and very powerful dynamics that we need to consider. And I think we also have ethical responsibilities to recognize that these are pretty potent technologies we're messing with, folks. Now, how do we actually do this? So let's take these 6 systems. They basically are using these voice recognition and TTS components on the back end. We multiplex various systems. We can work with IBM Watson, ChatScript, AML, Lewis, Lex, name the NLP system, and we've probably broken it. Once we get that input and output working, where we both have a large-scale system that has millions of different intent resolution variables and can also recognize what the pattern of conversation is going to be from the natural language component part, we can also then use pre-scripted systems, such as ChatScript or AML, which allows the poets that work at Botanic to then customize the personality and the output. So you have both the form and the function, and we do this multimodal input and output circuit for every single one of our systems so that we try to make sure that the avatar is able to see and hear and listen just like the user. Now, whenever we go, I mean, in each of these examples, whether it's air travel, hospital, restaurant, almost all service industries, we have particular archetypes and modes and ways in which people recognize what other people are supposed to do. So for example, if you go into a hospital and somebody's got a broom, you're not going to expect that person to give you heart surgery, right? And those kinds of cues, those visual cues are really key to setting up what the expectation is. What is an example of a service bot that somebody's built in here, please? Come on, there was somebody who mentioned they'd done an air travel bot, right? So that would be one in which you would need to have a visual cue so that the person's able to see what the system's going to be good for. All right, I hope you guys are more active on the Q&A. Here's Microsoft and Skype case study in which we developed Andy. We're still doing work on this. There are 3 other Lighthouse projects where Skype said, okay, what are other ways that we can build conversational avatars? Another one was for language learning. And just to dive into this, one of the ways that we're establishing trust is, as I mentioned, this multimodal interaction. And the reason for this isn't because we can technically do it. It's because of the way the human limbic system has evolved for the last 50,000 years. The reason why we're all sitting in this room together is the same reason. We're used to interacting like this with one another. And what happens is that digital media liquidates all of these different forms of conversation. It's only like 100 years now that you can do things like telephony, where you can talk to somebody that's not close to you. From the 50,000-year perspective, that is a really weird thing to do. And so then what we do is we take that a step further with chatbots, and then somebody's shooting you text. So our pretty antique hardware is frankly quite confused by that and doesn't build trust at all as a result. And there's some interesting studies where if you have, for example, try it sometime, send somebody you don't know a text message and see how quickly you can get them to trust you. Well, it turns out that it's something like 10 times as long via text. It's 5 times as long if you call them on the phone. And then you have a normal amount of trust if you can do something like a video chat, almost as good as if you can actually touch them and smell them. So these different modalities, when they're working together, basically tricks the brain into saying, oh, I'm talking to someone that I can trust, because that's how we're used to interacting with one another. You know, like ancient Sumerian, hail shepherd, the farmer goes, hail farmer. You know, they go back and forth. That's like they wave and they do these things at the same time. And body language is actually language. It's just visual. So in the case of Andy, what we did is, for the words, we got the input, the intent recognition, the natural language understanding. For the output, we had the natural language response. That's, as I mentioned, usually very handy to multiplex and use pre-scripted output. For the sounds, the input that's from the user, voice recognition or automated speech recognition. There's tons of packages out there, right? We don't really care. We're like Switzerland. We don't care what tool it is so much. I mean, our platform's able to aggregate these systems. So for various customers, whether it was, we had to unplug all of our AWS and like replug in Azure for Microsoft. So, but the point is that these are functions that serve the modalities. And then for the output, the system had to use a synthesized voice or TTS. And this is frankly a big industry problem. This is where it sucks because nobody wants to talk with a robotic robot. These things sound really robotic still. So we're seeing, I think in the next probably year, systems like Adobe Voco that will be coming out that will take your pre-recorded voice and then be able to concatenate it into a new sentence that you never said. Suddenly that's going to introduce this weird privacy thing where your call is being recorded for customer service purposes is going to take on a whole new meaning where actually your identity is being recorded because there's over 200 vectors in your voice, not just your gender and your age and your accent, such as where you're from, but you can tell whether somebody's drunk or not. All right. Then we have down the images, face rec and computer vision. And then for the animation, we've had to do a whole bunch of work in here. It's been like 20 years for some of us in the VR industry, and we've got to figure out ways in which we can take the natural language processing output and then actually build dynamic generations and dynamically generated animations on a front-end real-time 3D presentation layer. Or in the case of things like Messenger and Skype, a video codec. So here's why we have this phylum, as I said. The words are a chatbot, the sounds are an assistant, and the images facilitates a conversational avatar. Now, one of the problems that we've come across at Botanic is that while we've got this great platform that we can deploy and that our customers can then take and pick up and tweak, and they're able to go through this kind of a menuing system that allows them to determine what sort of a personality is most appropriate for that particular use case, we still need to do artisanal, custom-built code. We still have to have designers, poets, artists, and there's even a couple of musicians at Botanic, and we sit down with our customers and we're like, all right, what's the problem you got to solve? And who is the helper role? So for example, in the healthcare use case, you have somebody who's a doctor, a nurse, or a practitioner. And so we interview them. We say, how do you deal with people? How do you introduce yourself? What do you listen for? How do you introduce them to new problems? And then we just research and we wrap it up with some findings and we say, based on what we've discovered here, this is the way the use flow should work. And the bot's flow, that is the means by which the dialogue is managed, is sort of the spinal column of the whole system. That design then is really what leads the personality design into a template. And this is kind of cool because within the templates that we've built, we found that there's this sort of a DNA that's there. There's like, for example, we were helping Sensley. We built a personality for them that was an American healthcare personality. And we did a lot of research on figuring out what the appropriate tenor and tone of the character should be. And then they're like, okay, we're going to deploy this in the UK. So we said, all right, well, hold on, let's go talk to some folks in the UK and see what they like. Well, it turns out that all the Brits actually like things like bedside humor and like jokes about bedpans and stuff. The Americans didn't. So we go back, we take that personality template, we tweak it and customize it so that way not only do we put a British accented TTS and voice rec system on it, but the actual structure, the use flow, and the personality of the system actually is modified as well. Okay, so here's the problem. When you have multiple modes of input, and you have over 200 vectors of information, 200 signals, in just one of those modalities, like voice, we're looking at something that opens up coffers of personal data. I mean, like huge scads of individual data that is generated, whether it's for healthcare, whether it's financial management, whether it's for shopping. Any one of these use cases is basically a thing that unloads huge amounts of private data. Now, here in the day of Facebook and Google, there's a privacy publicity imbalance that's going on. We see that Google and Facebook are taking all of the value that we contribute to their systems via social media, and then what they do is they capitalize on that value. Now, we get free tools, and that's great, and those tools are valuable, but are they as valuable as the information being put in? Well, it doesn't seem like it because those are big, really profitable companies. So who's got a Facebook account in here? All right, and who's got a Google account also? Right, most of us. So basically, you can do the math yourself, look at how much that publicly traded company is worth, and then divide that by the number of users, and active accounts are roughly worth $150 a month for both systems, as it turns out. Now, I don't know about you, but as a writer and as a photographer, I like to get paid for my work. And I think it's cool that we get free tools, but I don't think it's that cool. And as we move into a new world in which Alexa is listening to us and able to record all of this data, not just simple search strings, like, ancient Chinese abortion medicine, or acupuncture for a bad back, which is actually really valuable data. But when you pinpoint the individual entity, the individual person, the individual voice print, the individual face, and you look at all of the correlative data that these things can generate, we've got something that is just going to be insane on our hands. And it's not that we have to be privacy freaks, nor is it that Facebook and Google need to be publicity freaks. Because the imbalance is a publicity-privacy balance. They publicize our private data. They do it via web pages. Well, it seems to me as though a few years down the road, there's going to be a bot for pretty much everybody on the planet. We've got a web page for most people on the planet, I think now, thanks to Facebook, etc. Now, the web page is just the social media interface. The web page allows one person to talk with another person. And when you consider that we have to use things like knowledge bases that you train up with experts, like a doctor, that knowledge base, which here is indicated kind of like Wikipedia in orange and red in the middle, is filled in by people that are experts. And then you have patients, and those are the people that basically are contributing, knowingly or not, all this personal data. So both the speaker and the listener via the bot, and especially a multimodal bot, are both very valuable contributors to this ecosystem. Now, let's also think about something like Twitter. This is where this group down here comes in. This is like the fire hose, the garden hose. GNIP invented this. They're kind of one of the granddaddies of end-user analytics and trends. Within a bot ecosystem, you can be able to do the same thing. So you have the doctors that are contributing information. You have the other people that are doing the advertising, they're paying for it. You have these people down here that are looking for trends. You have other folks that are over here that are being paid to develop for the system. And then, of course, you have at the top, us dear users. Now, I think that a well-built system, if we look at an economy, a large economic system such as we're now beginning to build, all of us in this room, it seems as though end users should have an option to say, this is my private data, and I know it's valuable. Or this is my private data, and I don't really care. But there should be a remuneration given to those individuals. So one of the things that we've looked at is how in the hell can a little company like Botanic, we're like 19 people, allow this kind of a thing to take place? Especially when we got like 6,000 people over at Amazon that are hammering away on Alexa. Alexa, by the way, is not only a problem because it interfaces in between the brand and the end user. Everyone's out building Alexa skills. And as a result, like BMW said, oh yeah, we got all these people, like the engineers are like busy building Alexa. And we're like, you're going to flush the BMW brand? Like, by the way, they also own the Rolls-Royce brand. And we're like, you don't need to do that. You don't need to give that relationship to Alexa. But we've got a big problem because how do we provide a system that allows brands to maintain their own brand identity? How do we build a system that allows each of us to retain the value of our own public and private information? Well, after 4 years of bootstrapping, and I'm proud, we had a really tough and gentle crew, we decided, well, there's this really, actually, let me back up. It was about 3 or 4 years ago. We were thinking, okay, bots are going to be closing sales cycles soon. We're going to make sure that we can do that digitally. Well, what's the best way to do that? It's basically something called blockchain. Now, who knows about blockchain? Yay! All right. Essentially, blockchain is a distributed ledger. It's a public record of who has made what transfers. And then every hour you close the envelope and you put a big red wax seal on it and say that's done. You put the next block on top, and after an hour you stamp that. And everyone's agreed these are the things that have happened in the past. So it's like an odometer. But it's a big deal, like a lot bigger deal than the web, because what it means is that we can now exchange value, whether it's source code or whether it's money, whether it's equity in a company, whether it's personal information. We can exchange it on the blockchain. Oh, and by the way, you can train natural language processing systems by contributing, for example, knowledge bases, bodies of text that you've written, or maybe, gee, your Facebook account. So we're like, okay, but what about that ecosystem? If we use blockchain, we allow people to train these systems via blockchain, and we do it with somebody like Microsoft, and we can like, holy cow, this is really cool because it means that we can actually build a real system. Now, let's go back a few more years. So we filed this patent for a voice-to-blockchain bridge. It was a very general method for saying you can manipulate blockchain just by voice interface. Because if the avatar is going to close a sales cycle, it needs to be able to interface with blockchain. And at some point, we began to think, well, this whole ecosystem really should have been invented years ago. And somebody like Wikipedia could have done a great job using this. There's one person that wrote one sentence on Wikipedia that's been read more than any other single sentence. And that author should have been contributed, but we didn't have something like blockchain. So now we've got bots. Now we've got blockchain. And now I would like just to call us in the room to consider that we build something that actually is democratic and actually does allow us to protect our private information and actually does allow us to be remunerated when it's publicized. So with that said, as you might have imagined, we are going to be doing an ICO. This is an initial coin offering. We have about 4,000 folks right now. There's kind of, friends and family, if you will, but people that have said that they would like to join us in this endeavor. And Stephen, thanks for letting me shout about this here, but if you would, go over to botoff.com and we will be open sourcing our patents, accepted patents for authentication of a bot or avatar, patents that are pending, such as voice-to-blockchain bridge, and other methods so that we can begin to build something like an industry standard as a community. So that we can begin to say, here's the way that bots can equitably exchange information with people. So botoff.com is the place to go. My name is Stephen Meadows, and I would like it if somebody would ask me the hardest question they can think of, please. All right, so we have virtual reality, we have bots, and we have blockchain. These are three pretty hyped factors. Has anybody in here done any virtual reality work? Okay. Any other blockchain work? Yeah, please. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. There are folks like the Security and Exchange Commission in the United States, and they're like, ICOs are really weird because when you have somebody raising like $1 billion, as IOTA did last month, within a couple of hours, because you've decentralized the economy, they're like, this is strange. And so the SEC says, you can't do an ICO unless it is not a security. If it's not a security, then it's okay. Which is to say, ICOs shouldn't be an investment method. So what we've done is we've set up an entity in Singapore. It's called SEED. And that Singaporean entity will be the steward of the nonprofit foundation. And it's a nonprofit because that way it can't be bought. That way all of the open source code that we put out there can never actually be capitulated. So that way the ICO follows SEC regulations. By the way, we're based in Delaware officially, and so we're complying with those certifications as well. And the token design itself is essentially a use flow. It's essentially a personality template, but it's open for a lot of other kinds of data to be inserted. It's basically a metadata model, so that whether you're developing real-time 3D animations, whether you're developing video codecs, whether you're developing knowledge bases, or whether you're developing things like Adobe Voco that solve the TTS problems, you can still contribute to that ecosystem. So I would like to know if you had, just a show of hands, please, given that you have a basic understanding of what bots are, and given that most of you have Facebook or Google accounts, who would like to get $75 a month back for signing into something like botoff.com, this authenticating bots, and get $75 a month back? Looks like about half. Okay, Kathy, we got that recorded, about half people. And how many of you in here have been paid for writing or publishing photographs or selling paintings or something like that? Great, yeah. All of us in here are writers. Hate to break it to you, every single one of us. Unless somebody in here is illiterate, which I don't think is the case, we're all writers, and all of our writing is valuable. Hope we can recognize that. Anybody else, any other questions? Yes, please. Right. It's essentially a reverse licensing model. Ted Nelson, when he invented hypertext decades ago, had backlinking built in. It was an assumption that links would always be read both ways. But the web wasn't deployed that way. I helped develop well.com, which was the third .com website back in '92. And it was really out of laziness. People were like, oh, they were trying to build reverse linking in, but it was manually a big pain in the ass and it wasn't really part of the HTML protocol. And so it got dumped. But with blockchain, we can say these 50 people all contributed these assets to this particular conversational avatar. And those 50 people then automatically, via what's called an ERC20 smart contract initially, then to be converted into a token secondarily, get remunerated. Make sense? Okay. Reverse licensing, new idea for the internet. Yeah. Right, it's totally not in their interest, is it? Because Zuckerberg's sticking, the guy's making bank every day. I don't think they'll like it. But I think there's a lot more people out there in the world that would like to change that model than there are people working at Facebook. So I think it's a question of what is the potency of the idea? If there's something that's really there, then I think it's going to grow. I'm just like a meteorologist, right? All I do is I stand around, I try to look at the weather and read the direction things are going. So it's not our idea at Botanic. This is just stuff that we've collected. They're not going to be happy. But I think it's an inevitable process in which decentralization and the fact that our personal data is valuable, those things I think will continue to go forward. So yeah, they're going to be upset. And yeah, they're going to try to buy it. And fuck them, I don't care. Let's see what we can do anyway, right? Let's fix this. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so we've been lucky enough to do some work with the Chinese, Dutch, and American governments. In Holland, we've had a huge warm reception for this. That's actually where we first heard about open source and Linux a couple decades ago, actually. And I think also, Singapore, they're currently linking their national currency to things like Ethereum and Bitcoin. So those governments, for example, are really open to this idea. And let's remember also that in the day of Trump, an American company that owns your personal data falls into question. And there's a lot of people in this room, thank you, Stephen, there's a lot of us in this room, thanks again, that are from other countries. And the fact that we're from other countries, I think, gives us, again, an obligation, not only as bot developers, but as an international community, to fix these problems and help governments find the right way. All right? Stephen, thank you very much.